Why can't you stay consistent, even when you try hard? You start with motivation, make a plan, follow it for a few days, and then something breaks the streak. And once it breaks, it feels surprisingly hard to return. This is not simply a discipline problem. Consistency is a product of how your brain learns, predicts reward, manages energy, and automates behavior. And when those systems are misaligned, inconsistency becomes the default. Let's start with how habits are actually formed. Your brain builds habits through a reinforcement loop involving cue, routine, and reward. But underneath that loop is a neural system centered around the basal ganglia, which stores repeated behaviors so they can run automatically without heavy involvement from the prefrontal cortex. Early in a habit, the prefrontal cortex is highly active because you need attention, planning, and self-control. But with repetition, control shifts toward the basal ganglia, reducing cognitive effort and making the behavior more automatic. This shift is critical because consistency becomes easy only after this transfer happens. Nahama. And before that point, your brain must spend energy to maintain the behavior. Now consider energy. The prefrontal cortex is metabolically expensive and sensitive to fatigue, stress, and sleep quality. And when you are tired or overloaded, its ability to maintain goal-directed behavior decreases, which is why consistency often fails at the end of the day or during stressful periods. This is not a lack of willpower. It is a reduction in available executive function. Now let's bring dopamine into the system. Dopamine does not just reward behavior, it encodes prediction and learning, particularly through a mechanism known as reward prediction error, where your brain compares expected reward with actual reward and updates future behavior accordingly. If a behavior produces a better than expected outcome, dopamine spikes and strengthens the neural pathway. But if the reward is weaker or delayed, dopamine signaling is reduced, and the behavior is less likely to be repeated. This is why many positive habits fail. Exercise, studying, and long-term projects often provide delayed rewards, while distractions provide immediate feedback, so the brain learns faster from the easy behavior. Now consider reinforcement schedules. Behaviors that are rewarded immediately and consistently are learned quickly, but behaviors with delayed or uncertain rewards require more repetitions to become stable. And during this phase, inconsistency is common because the brain has not yet fully learned the value of the behavior. This is also why small wins matter. They create immediate reinforcement signals that help bridge the gap between action and reward. Now, let's add a psychological layer. According to self-determination theory, motivation and consistency are strongly influenced by autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And when a habit lacks these elements, it feels forced, ineffective, or disconnected, which reduces the likelihood of persistence. If you don't feel in control of the habit, if you don't feel you are improving, or if the habit is not connected to something meaningful, your brain assigns it low value. Now consider identity. Research on identity-based habits shows that behaviors aligned with your self-concept are more stable over time because your brain seeks coherence between actions and identity. And when there is a mismatch, the behavior feels unnatural and is more likely to be dropped. Saying, "I am trying to work out," frames the behavior as temporary, while "I am someone who trains regularly" integrates it into identity, increasing consistency. Now let's talk about friction. Your brain is extremely sensitive to the cost of starting a behavior, and even small increases in friction, distance, time, effort, uncertainty, can significantly reduce the likelihood of action because your brain constantly evaluates effort versus reward. If effort feels high and reward feels low or delayed, the behavior is rejected. This evaluation happens quickly and often subconsciously. Now combine this with modern environments. You are surrounded by low-friction, high-reward alternatives. Phones, apps, instant entertainment, and these create competing behaviors that are easier to choose, especially when your cognitive resources are low. This shifts your default behavior toward easier options, reducing consistency for effortful habits. Now consider stress and variability. Consistency requires stability, but your internal state changes daily. Sleep quality, stress, mood, cognitive load, and these fluctuations affect your ability to act because the same task can feel easy one day and difficult the next. Without systems that account for this variability, consistency breaks. Now let's connect everything. Habit formation depends on repetition and basal ganglia encoding. Early behavior depends on prefrontal cortex effort. Dopamine reinforces actions based on reward prediction. Psychological factors influence perceived value, and environmental friction determines whether you start. If any of these components are weak, consistency fails. Now think about real life. You plan to build a habit, but the reward is delayed, your environment is distracting, your brain is tired, and the task feels slightly difficult to start, so your brain selects an easier alternative. That choice is reinforced, and the loop repeats. Over time, inconsistency becomes the learned pattern. Now, here is the key insight. Consistency is not about pushing harder. It is about reducing the gap between intention and action across these systems. So, what can you do? First, reduce friction aggressively. Prepare your environment so that the first step requires minimal effort, because starting is the most sensitive point in the behavior chain. Second, create immediate reinforcement. Add small, clear rewards after action so your brain can register the behavior as valuable. Third, stabilize cues. Perform the habit at the same time and context to strengthen cue-based activation in the basal ganglia. Fourth, scale difficulty dynamically. On low energy days, reduce the task size rather than skipping entirely, because maintaining the pattern is more important than maximizing intensity. Fifth, build identity alignment. Reinforce the idea that the behavior reflects who you are, not just what you are trying. Sixth, manage cognitive load. Simplify decisions and reduce unnecessary inputs so your prefrontal cortex has enough capacity to support the behavior. And finally, normalize inconsistency. Missing once does not break the habit, but missing repeatedly does. So the priority is rapid return, not perfection. Because your brain does not need flawless execution. It needs repeated patterns with reinforcement. And once those patterns are encoded, consistency becomes automatic. If you found this helpful, subscribe to Nexplain.